The net came up heavy, too heavy, and wrong. 30 years I've fished these waters off the coast of Norway, and I know the weight of cod, the struggle of halibut, even the dead pull of waterlogged driftwood that tries to capsize your boat before you haul it aboard. This was none of those things. My net rose from the black depths at 3 a.m., that cursed hour when the world hangs between night and day, with something inside that made the steel cables scream against the winch like a dying animal. The sound woke me from my bunk, where I'd been catching an hour of sleep while Olaf manned the bridge. I stumbled up to the deck in my thermal underwear and boots, the October cold biting through the fabric like tiny knives. The fog was thick enough to cut with a filleting knife, reducing our world to a circle of grey light from the deck lamps and the groaning winch mechanism that was pulling something up from the depths. My name is Eric Halverson. I'm 52 years old, a widower for 3 long years, and the owner of a fishing trawler called the Skarven, the Magpie in English, though my late wife Maria always said it should be called the Stubborn Bastard, because I refused to give up on it, even when the engines died twice in one season and the hull needed more patches than a quilt. And 5 days ago, on a foggy October morning that should have been like any other, I caught something that was never meant to see the light of the human world. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about the ocean, about the world, about what lurks in the spaces between the waves where sunlight dies and ancient things still swim. The first thing I saw was blue. Not the pale blue of shallow seas where children splash in summer, not the grey blue of storm clouds that herald violence from above. This was the blue of the deepest ocean trenches, the colour you see in your nightmares when you dream of drowning, luminescent and alive in a way that made my eyes water. The glow pulsed with its own heartbeat, growing brighter and dimmer like a massive creature breathing in the dark. In the pre-dawn fog, it looked like we'd pulled a piece of the abyss itself onto our deck. My deckhand Olaf stood frozen at the winch controls, his weathered face, 60 years of North Sea wind carved into leather, gone white as a sail. His hand hovered over the emergency release, trembling. In all our years working together, through storms that nearly capsized us and equipment failures that almost cost us our lives, I had never seen Olaf afraid. Cautious, yes. Respectful of the sea's power, always, but never terrified. "Captain," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the winch motor. "What in God's name is that?" What in all the saints and angels is that thing? The net spilled onto the deck in a cascade of silver fish, our night's catch, thousands of dollars worth of cod and haddock, and black seaweed that steamed in the cold air as if it had just come from a volcanic vent. The fish were dead. All of them. Not suffocated from being out of water, but dead before we pulled them up, their eyes white and clouded, as if they'd been dead for days. The seaweed wrapped around everything, like the tentacles of some massive octopus, black as sin, and reeking of sulphur and ancient salt. And there, at the centre of the carnage, tangled in the ropes like a pearl caught in spider's silk, was a woman. Except calling her a woman would be like calling the sun a candle or the ocean a pond. She wasn't human, not entirely, not even close. Her upper body was humanoid, feminine, with skin that shimmered between deep blue and silver like scales catching moonlight on a calm sea. But it wasn't skin. Not really. It moved like water itself, rippling with iridescence that seemed to contain tiny galaxies of stars. When the light hit her just right, I could see patterns in her flesh, ancient symbols, like runes carved into ice, pulsing with that same eerie blue glow. But her face, my God, her face was almost painfully beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, like staring into the sun or trying to hold infinity in your mind. Sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, lips the colour of midnight sea, and eyes, Jesus Christ, her eyes, like liquid mercury, swirling silver that held all the cold fury of a winter storm and all the depth of the ocean trench. They were inhuman, utterly alien, yet somehow more expressive than any human eyes I'd ever seen. And right now, they were filled with rage and agony in equal measure. Her hair flowed around her in tendrils that moved on their own, defying gravity as if she were still underwater, each strand seeming to float in invisible currents. Some strands were deep blue like her skin, others a pale silver white that glowed faintly, and still others were the colour of deep sea trenches, that blue so dark it was almost black. They created a halo of colour around her head that shifted and writhed like living things, like dozens of sea snakes coiling and uncoiling endlessly. From her waist down, where legs should have been on a human woman, was a tail. Massive, powerful, as thick around as my torso, covered in scales that graduated from deep sapphire at her waist to an almost translucent pale blue at the fins. The scales were the size of my palm, and each one seemed to contain its own universe of colour, reflecting and refracting light in impossible ways. The fins themselves were torn in a dozen places, caught in the nets, bleeding a substance that looked like liquid starlight, thick and silver and glowing, pooling on my deck and burning small holes in the wood where it dripped. She was gasping, her chest heaving with effort, and I could see them now. Gills, elegant slits along her ribs that opened and closed desperately, trying to filter oxygen from air they were never designed for. Around her neck hung multiple chains of black coral, intricate and beautiful, and what looked like human skulls, tiny and ancient, no larger than walnuts, strung like beads between obsidian pearls. Each skull had a different expression carved into it, and I didn't want to think about what they represented or how old they were. "Get her back in the water," I shouted, breaking from my paralysis, my voice harsh in the silence that had fallen over the deck. "Now, Olaf!" "She's dying." But the moment I moved toward her, took even one step across the deck littered with dead fish and smoking seaweed, her eyes snapped to mine with the force of a physical blow. I stopped mid-stride, frozen not by fear, but by the sheer weight of her gaze. It felt like she was looking through me, past me, into every secret I'd ever kept and every lie I'd ever told. "Don't touch me." Her voice was like the grinding of continents, deep and ancient and wrong, in the way it resonated not in my ears, but in my chest, in my bones, in the very marrow of who I was. Each word hit like a hammer. She spoke Norwegian, but with an accent I couldn't place, an accent from a language that predated human tongues, that was old when the first fish crawled onto land and decided to breathe air. "You're dying," I said, dropping to my knees on the deck but keeping my distance, holding my hands out to show I meant no harm. "The nets, they're cutting into your fins. You're bleeding. Let me help. Please." "Help?" The sound she made was almost laughter, but bitter as rotting seaweed, harsh as coral scraping rock. "You surface dwellers know nothing of help. Nothing. You take and you destroy and you poison and you call it progress. You call it civilization. You call it conquest." Her mercury eyes bored into me with the weight of millennia. "Do you know what you've caught, fisherman? Do you have any conception of what lies bleeding on your deck?" "A mermaid," Olaf breathed from behind me, his voice thick with terror and wonder and something like religious awe. I heard him make the sign of the cross, heard him whisper a prayer to saints whose names I'd forgotten. She laughed again, and this time the sound made the deck timbers groan, made the steel cables of the winch sing with resonance, made the very air vibrate. Mermaid. Such a quaint word, such a simple, childish word for something so ancient, so complex, so far beyond your understanding. "I am Nethys, queen of the abyssal realm, keeper of the deep trenches where light has never touched, mistress of the cold currents, first daughter of Thalassa who predates your gods, guardian of the paths between. And you, Eric Halverson, captain of the Skarven, have made a terrible, terrible mistake. She knew my name. She knew my ship. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October cold. Behind me, I heard Olaf make a strangled sound. "How do you—" I started, but she cut me off. "How do I know your name?" Her voice was growing weaker, I realized. Each word cost her more effort than the last. "The ocean knows everything about those who dare sail upon her waters, Eric. Every ship that ever left port, every name painted on a hull, every prayer whispered into the wind hoping for safe passage. We listen, Eric Halverson. We watch from the depths. We remember every slight, every kindness, every crime against the deep. And believe me when I tell you, the crimes are many." The boat suddenly lurched. A wave, impossibly large for the calm morning, slammed against the hull. Then another. The ocean, which had been as still as glass moments before, was now churning. "Captain," Olaf called from the wheelhouse, "the barometer just dropped. No storm on the forecast, but—" Another wave hit, hard enough to send equipment sliding across the deck. "It's like the sea is boiling." Nethys smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp, too many. "They know I'm here. My people. My ocean." Her eyes never left mine. "You have stolen their queen, fisherman. What do you think they'll do to get me back?" As if in answer, something massive struck the hull from below. The entire boat shuddered. Through the porthole, I caught a glimpse of something huge and serpentine gliding past. Not a whale, not a shark. Something that should exist only in nightmares and old sailors' tales. "Cut her free!" I grabbed my knife and moved toward the nets. Nethys flinched, but didn't stop me as I began sawing through the ropes that bound her. "Whatever's down there, we're giving you back." "Too late," she said. But there was something different in her voice now, not softer, but less hostile. "The nets have iron in them. Old iron. It's burning me, poisoning me. Even if you return me to the water now, I won't survive the descent." I looked at the wounds where the ropes had cut into her flesh. The edges were blackened, necrotic, spreading like frostbite. The liquid starlight that bled from them was growing dim. Another impact, this time from the starboard side. I heard Olaf scream. Through the spray-covered windows, I saw what looked like massive tentacles, each as thick as a tree trunk, rising from the water. They were bioluminescent, pulsing with the same eerie blue light that emanated from Nethys. "Your choice, surface dweller." Nethys gasped, her voice weakening. "Throw me back and drown with honor, trying to save me. Or keep me here and let my guardians tear your vessel apart piece by piece until they reclaim my corpse." "There has to be a third option," I said, still cutting through the nets. "What do you need?" "Fresh water? Medicine? What heals iron poisoning in your kind?" She stared at me with those mercury eyes, and for the first time I saw surprise flicker across her alien face. "Why do you care?" "I am your enemy. My people have drowned countless humans. We sink ships into the rocks. We drag sailors to the depths. Why would you help me?" "Because you're hurt," I said simply. "And because those things out there will kill my crew, whether I throw you back or not. So maybe, just maybe, if I help you survive, you can call them off." A tentacle crashed through the wheelhouse window. Olaf stumbled out onto the deck, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "Captain! We need to abandon ship." "Not yet," I turned back to Nethys. "Tell me how to save you." She closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought I'd lost her. Then she spoke, so quietly I had to lean in to hear over the roar of the attacking sea. "Salt water, Pure salt water, not your polluted ocean, and time. The iron must work its way out, but Eric Halverson of the Skarven... Her hand, webbed and clawed, reached up to grip my wrist with surprising strength. If you do this, if you keep me aboard your ship and I survive, you will have created a debt, one the ocean never forgets. Is that a threat or a promise? Both, she whispered and fainted. The next 3 hours were the longest of my life. With Olaf's help, and God bless him, he never once suggested we just throw her back and sail away as fast as the engines would take us. We dragged Nethys below deck to the fish hold. Every movement made her cry out in pain, that terrible grinding voice making sounds no living thing should make. The wounds where the iron-laced nets had cut her were spreading, black necrosis eating into her luminescent flesh like acid. We hastily flooded the hold with water from our ballast tanks. It was seawater, pulled from these same depths hours earlier, but at least it was cleaner than the churning maelstrom outside where her guardians raged. I tore every clean cloth I could find aboard, towels, spare clothes, even my own shirt, and soaked them in pure sea salt mixed with ballast water, then wrapped her wounds as gently as I could while she hissed and writhed beneath my hands. Her skin burned my fingers where I touched her, not with heat, but with cold, so intense it felt like fire. And where her blood, that liquid starlight, touched my hands, it left marks. Silver stains that glowed faintly in the dark hold, marks that I still carry today, marks that remind me this was real. This happened. I didn't dream or hallucinate or lose my mind to exhaustion. Will she live? Olaf asked, his face illuminated by the bioluminescent glow of Nethys's body. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. I don't know, I admitted, tying off another bandage. I don't know anything about her kind, what they need, how they heal. We're just guessing. Maybe that's enough, Olaf said quietly. Maybe trying is enough. Above us, on the deck, the ocean raged. The massive creatures that had been circling since we pulled Nethys aboard continued their assault, but it was controlled, measured. They weren't trying to sink us. Not yet. They were testing us, I realized, seeing what we would do. Would we panic and throw their queen back into the water to save ourselves? Would we try to escape, dragging her further from her home? Or would we do the unthinkable, the unprecedented, the thing no human had probably ever done in all of history? Would we try to save her? Why haven't they sunk us yet? Olaf asked the same question that had been eating at me. They could tear us in half if they wanted to. I've seen whales smaller than those things. One good hit and we'd be swimming. They know she's still alive, I said, checking the makeshift bandages for the 10th time. The black necrosis had stopped spreading, thank God, but she was still unconscious, still barely breathing. Her gills opened and closed in fitful rhythm, fighting to extract oxygen from water that wasn't moving, wasn't alive with current and pressure. They're giving us a chance. A chance to do what? Save her, I said simply, or die trying. That first day and night were hell. The storm, if you could call it that, this supernatural rage of the sea, never let up. Waves battered us from all sides. Equipment that should have been secured broke loose and crashed across the deck. The radio crackled with desperate calls from other ships in the area, asking if we needed help, asking what the hell was causing the localized typhoon that appeared on no weather chart. I couldn't answer them. What would I say? That we'd caught the Queen of the Deep and her subjects wanted her back? Olaf and I took turns watching her, monitoring her breathing, changing her bandages when they became soaked with her strange blood. We barely slept. Every time one of us started to drift off, another impact would rock the ship. Another impossibly large shape would glide past the hull. Another reminder that we were being hunted, surrounded. That mercy was a thin thread we walked, and it could snap at any moment. On the second day, as grey dawn broke over a sea that had no right to be as angry as it was under clear skies, Nethys opened her eyes. The mercury had dulled to a flat grey, lifeless, but at least she was conscious. She looked around the flooded hold with an expression I couldn't read on her alien features. Was it surprise? Confusion? I couldn't tell. "You kept me," she said, her voice weaker than before, but still carrying that resonance that made my bones vibrate. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an observation, as if she were noting a curiosity of nature. "I kept you alive," I corrected, bringing her a bucket of fresh seawater I'd collected that morning, carefully skimming it from the surface where the storm spray kept it clean. "Drink. Your gills are still inflamed. You need to hydrate." She drank, slowly, painfully, and then fixed me with those strange eyes that had regained a spark of their original intensity. "Why haven't you tried to contact your authorities? Sell me to your scientists, put me in one of your glass prisons, and charge money for people to gawk at the freak. That's what your kind does with wonders, Eric Halverson. You cage them, you study them, you break them down into component parts until the magic is gone, and all that's left is data and disappointment." "Would you prefer I did?" I asked, sitting on an overturned crate. The ship was still being pounded by waves, though less violently than yesterday. "Would that be better than trying to save your life?" "I would prefer," she said, with what might have been bitter humour, "that you had never cast your net where it didn't belong, that your greed hadn't reached into my realm, that you had stayed in your shallow waters where you belong." She paused, wincing as pain rippled across her features. The truth settled between us. We were trapped together. Nethys, wounded, poisoned by iron, and unable to return to the sea, and me, Eric Halverson, stuck on a ship surrounded by the Guardians who refused to leave until their queen was safe. "I owe you my life," she said quietly. "I don't want anything," I told her. "Just get healthy enough to go home. Can you call them off?" She laughed softly. "They won't leave, but they also won't destroy a ship holding me. So we wait. 3, maybe 4 days." And so we waited. During that time, something unexpected happened. We talked. Maybe it was isolation or the strange intimacy of tending to someone so alien, yet so vulnerable. For the first time since my wife Maria died, I spoke honestly. She told me about her abyssal realm, cities made of whalebone and coral, bioluminescent life that never knew light, and a civilization older than humanity's oldest myths. "Atlantis was ours," she said simply. "Not destroyed, reclaimed." I asked if that was a threat. "No, just truth. The ocean is patient, but not limitless." I couldn't argue. I'd seen the ocean change over decades, warming waters, dwindling fish, plastic everywhere. We were killing it. Then she asked, "Why do your people destroy what keeps them alive?" So I told her about my world, about growing up on the sea, fearing it and loving it, about Maria, about loss. She listened, then said softly, "The ocean remembers her. Those who love the sea never vanish. They become part of it." I didn't know if it was truth or comfort, but it was the first thing in years that eased the grief. On the 4th day, she stood healed, scales bright again, eyes like liquid mercury. Massive shapes surfaced, her guardians. Before diving back into her world, she removed a glowing scale and placed it in my hand. "If you ever need the ocean's help, cast this into the water and call my name. You saved more than my life, Eric. You reminded me that not all surface dwellers destroy. Some protect." Her final words stayed with me. "You caught a queen, but what you truly caught was hope." She leapt into the sea, barely disturbing the surface, and within moments the waters calmed. It was over. Olaf stood beside me, stunned. Did that really happen, Captain? I looked at the glowing scale. It happened.